Happy Friday, everyone. Hello, hello. Hello from Colorado again. I am still in Colorado. If you did not know, thank you all so much for coming in. It is cold. Oh my goodness, it's cold. Nisi is here. Good to see you. Joan is not feeling well. I'm wishing you all the best, Joan. Hope you feel better soon. Kimberly, my sister out in the field. That's Bakersfield. Hi, Kimberly. Laura Coffin. I brought that carry-all with me. It is full, and I really love that thing. Thank you so much again for that. Karen B. Hi, you made it tonight. Good to see you. Tammy Ress, good to see you. I hope you're feeling well tonight. Chucker Steve, oh, hello, hello. Is it cold where you are, Steve? Hello, Mary Webb. Glad you're here. Colleen, it's 74 in New Jersey. Well, it is. Oh, and then now you're down to 41 and then down to 31. Oh my gosh. Oh, you like the hat? Yep, I finished a hat. Hello, Jody. Thank you. This is my pattern. You can find it on my website. It is a free pattern. No, it's not cold there? Okay. Kathy G, hello. Good to see you. Yes, glad you're here, Jody. Good to see you. Awesome. Yes, this is my pattern, and y'all, I've had a hat on almost all day today. So my hair is just a mess and I need another haircut. Dad and I were talking about that today, but we have 3 inches of snow on the ground. And I said, not today. But it turned out really good. I like it a lot. And this is using my pattern. And my pattern comes with a paw print here. And it also comes with a little puppy print here at the top. And I generally don't, just because it's faster not to do the puppies. And I really like the paws. And anyway, yeah. Looks like a bullseye on the top, doesn't it? Bullseye. And Chelsea said, hi, Chelsea. Chelsea said it looks kind of like peppermint, like, a peppermint stick. So, but yeah, it turned out really cute. I don't know. I may sell this one. We'll have to wait and see. But I like it. It's not quite heavy enough for as cold as it is here, though. Not quite. Yes, it would be a great gift for her. It sure would. I wrote this as a fingering weight pattern, and then I went back and I added in how to do it for a worsted weight. So you should be able to do both from the same pattern. Oh, thank you. Okay. You guys, did you see what I wrote as my intro there? The George W. This is Wagner, not the ex-president. George Wagner IV testified. And not only that, but since he testified, now the defense and the prosecution have both rested. Now, I don't know if this has actually gone to the jury yet. I think they're tying up all the loose ends. So, it's getting close now. I want to talk about a couple of my favorite things at the moment. This is really, I know y'all have heard of Burt's Bees, right? Burt's Bees. This is sweet mandarin. This has been my best friend the last few days. I'm so dry. So dry. Hi, Sharon. And I am still behind on this trial. So just so you know, I'm not fully up to date. I'm going to go ahead and share with you what I already have figured out. And this is my other favorite thing right now. And this is an older one. This is not this year, so I don't know whether they have this one. Chelsea will be able to tell you. But this is Sugared Snickerdoodle. It's Bath and Body Works. 24-hour moisture. So I think this was last year's. I love, love, love the way this smells. And I've been putting stuff on my hands right and left because haven't seen that one? Okay. So they may not have that one this year. They might have something similar though, some kind of a cookie kind of thing. It smells fabulous. I do pretty much my lower arms, my elbows, my hands, and then whatever I'm working on will smell like sugared snickerdoodle. That's what I like. The hand soaps are on sale again tomorrow. Okay, man, they have been hitting the sales, crazy hitting the sales. I have no idea what they're going to do for Black Friday, but they're saying that they're doing early stuff. Now we're talking about Bath and Body Works. So y'all be looking for their sales. I'm going to get my notes out here, you guys, because I got a lot of notes. But again, please, if you know anything, if you have watched this trial and you know some stuff, go ahead and place it in there in your comments. I would love to see what you guys have discovered. I am behind because, as you know, Dad was in the hospital, had a lot going on here. Haven't exactly been on vacation and haven't really been able to sit and watch the trial like I wanted to. So, yeah. But I am going to, I thought I was set up and ready to go here, you guys, but evidently not. So, let me see if I can get this set up. Yes, and that's what I was thinking because a lot of the Bath and Body stuff is like $3.95 and that kind of thing. Perfect for gifts, you guys. Okay. Now maybe I've got that set up where I can read it. Maybe. Oh, I hate to hear that, Karen. Now, I do have to be careful about which scents that I do because a lot of them are really, they will really get my sinuses all in a flux. So I don't really want anything that's perfumey. Can't do anything too perfumey. But other than that, I'm good to go. So. Hi, Barbara. Good to see you. Glad you came in. All right. Now, you guys, most of my notes right now are related to George's first day and a half, the first day and a half or so on the stand. And this is what he went over with his defense lawyer. Okay. So I have just started to get into where he's being questioned by the prosecution. So I don't have a whole lot there. Most of this, and this may be a little bit boring, and I may just kind of run through this a little bit, but it kind of gives you a little, it's got some things in here related to stuff that's already been, talked about. So, hello, Annie. Good to see you. Oh, my yarn shelf. Well, so this is the Colorado yarn shelf. Since I am not at home, it's not real full, but I do have more yarn over there. And then can you see this right here? we're going to talk about this too, because this is going to be another new project. So the first part of George's testimony, they were talking about him and how he grew up in Pike County. Now, for those not familiar with my live, I try to talk through a lot of my notes, and then I will come back and answer questions here in a little while. So, yeah, this is my emergency yarn. It is. So, okay. So George says that he had lived in Pike County in this is southern Ohio, okay, until the age of around 23. He was homeschooled, and after he did his schoolwork, his time was spent doing his chores. Now, his testimony goes back and forth. He and his lawyer went back and forth on this. So it doesn't, when I'm reading this, it's not because I took my notes out of order. It's the order in which they talked about these things. No notification? Well, that's just wrong. It should let you know when I'm on. Interestingly, George quit school when he was around 13, between 13 and 14. He quit school. He was homeschooled, but he quit school. Said he wanted to be a game warden, but his dad pushed him to be a mechanic. Now, his dad, Billy, thought that all law enforcement was crooked, so he did not want George to be in law enforcement because of that. And they had lots and lots of animals at their place. They had cows, they had chickens, they had lots and lots of animals. And his chores that he talked about was related to anything that needed to be done there on their property. So I'm working on my seeing double shawl. And later on, he talks about getting in trouble because he tried to get out of these chores. And mostly because, so there's a general theme, and I'm going to insert what I think also along the way. And this is only my opinion, okay? And I will tell you that it is my opinion. But remember that I told you when this trial first started, that the defense attorneys were trying to make the jury understand that George was just not like the rest of his family, that, he you had to give him a break because he couldn't pick his family. And he was not like all of them. And so, poor George. And also George was very, very heavy for most of his life. So he, had very poor self-esteem because of being so heavy. So, we have to feel sorry for George. That's my take. Okay. Yes, and hello to all the lurkers. Thank you for reminding me, Chelsea. I forget sometimes to say, but I'm so glad you are all watching also. Very much appreciate you. Even if you don't speak in the I know you're there. I see you, and I love you too. So George and his lawyer, they talked about how George having the same name as his dad and his grandfather was very complicated. That having the same name would sometimes things would get messed up because their social security numbers would get kind of entangled. And a lot of that was because George's father, Billy, the things that he would do and get himself into would cause problems. And so therefore, George's social security number would get hit, and so on and so forth. They would just it was kind of a mess. And that's why he did not name his son George. That's why, because he did not want his son to have the same problem that he had with his name. So some of the things that George went through growing up. Billy, his father, now Billy's name, again, Billy is George Wagner II. No, George Wagner III. And George is George Wagner IV. Okay. The grandfather would have been George Wagner II. And the original, he went by Bob. And all of these names and all of these people got talked about during this trial as well. It gets a little complicated with all that, certainly. So some of the things they would do. Billy taught George and his brother Jake how to pick locks. They learned how to pick locks on vehicles. They learned how to pick locks on houses. They learned how to pick locks on tractor trailers, on the backs of the tractor trailers, how to get into those. He was teaching them how to watch for cameras, and he wanted them to watch for policemen. And he would pay them whenever they were out with their dad, driving with their dad. He would pay them $1 for every policeman that they saw. So if they saw a policeman, he'd give them $1, and so on, so on, so on. Then that went from watching policemen to trying to find out where all the cameras were. And if they saw the cameras, great, but they would get their $1. But if they didn't see a camera and their dad did see the camera, they would lose privileges on the four-wheelers. So that's interesting. It's like how to raise a hoodlum 101. They advanced to stealing things. They stole tractor trailers. They stole fuel, was one of their biggest things that they did, was stealing. They all drove diesels. Everyone around there, kind of like Texas and a lot of other places, they all drove diesel vehicles. So they would go to gas stations, to these gas stations that had the gas tank underneath the ground, and they would open those up, and they would siphon off the fuel into these big tanks that they had on their trailers, and then they would sell it for half price. They never paid for fuel themselves. They all drove diesels, and they never paid for fuel. So that was one of their big sellers. And then when they went to stealing, later on, when they went to stealing tractor trailers off of an 18-wheeler, then they started stealing things like one story about a whole trailer load full of Rocky boots. And he said that everybody in Pike County had Rocky boots that time. Then they stole a whole tractor trailer full of hot tubs. So other than that, George says that he spent a lot of time with Chris Newcomb. Now, if you remember, Chris Newcomb would be Angela, George and Jake's mother, would be her half brother. And Chris was only around a year older than George. So they were more like brothers than uncle and nephew. He also said that Jake did not want to go do a lot of the things that he did with Chris, the four-wheeling, the hunting, the fishing, and all of those things, because Jake would rather play zombie video games. George says he started drinking at around 12 or 13. He talked about how he did know Hannah Roden, and that he knew Hannah, and then he met Frankie, which he didn't at the time know that Frankie was Hannah's brother. And he became very, very good friends with Frankie. And a lot of what they did was drinking and some of what I said earlier. And this was around the age of about 16. So that much fuel is a lot of money, is what Steve is saying. The amount of fuel that they stole, that's a lot of money. Yes. Yep. And people don't lock their trailers. Yeah. Yes, and I have a lot of questions about that, how they could have gotten away with a lot of the things that they got away with. It doesn't make sense to me how some of this got by law enforcement. I don't know. I really don't. That it has been said that this Wagner family, going all the way back to Bob Wagner and Frederica, who owned the Flying W Ranch, and that was what, 2,000 acres or something like that, and they owned all this property in the county and yada yada yada. Supposedly they were very crooked, and that this whole family was crooked from the get-go, and everybody knew it. So I don't know how that plays into how they got away with all of this, but evidently they did. Now, George says that he spent a lot of time with Frankie at Big Bear Lake. Now, if you remember, Big Bear Lake was also where Chris Roden Sr. worked, and Frankie was working out there with him, okay? They did camping, drinking, fishing, boating, all that stuff out there. And Jake would go, but he didn't participate with all the other things that they were doing. He didn't drink because he was better than everybody else. So he didn't believe in drinking, and he didn't want Hannah drinking. And George says that Jake would not let Hannah participate with what they were doing because he didn't want her drinking. So they'd stay back in the tent together. Now, he talked about that some of the stuff that happened with his family and how crooked they were. Okay. And this is all background stuff, you guys, that was brought up through the trial. And I thought it was interesting to go ahead and tell you this part and get this part out of the way, because a lot of this was testified, and and a lot of this comes down to the state trying to build their case of a conspiracy, how this family worked together on all of this stuff, that this had been going on for a very long time, that they were crooked as heck all the way along, and that, it was not a stretch that they would go through and do what they did. So at age 6, which would have been around 1997, George says that's when Angela, his mother, tried to burn their trailer, but it didn't work. And then around 2000, he would be about age 9. She did burn the house, but it wasn't all the way. She managed to get it all the way through the the kitchen and the bathroom and the dining room, something like that. And then Frederica helped them rebuild that. And then they also, after that one, she burned that one. And after that, Frederica bought them a brand new trailer to put in that one's place. Now that one, which would be the third one, George called the Kentucky Wonder Mansion because he said they morphed it. It had one part and then they added another part on either side, so it was like an L shape. And he called that the Kentucky Wonder Mansion. And he had his own, where George lived was off down one end, and he had his own entry so he could come and go as he pleased, which he liked that. Throughout this whole thing where he's telling his story, there's this theme of how George didn't want to be around his family, that he didn't get along with his family, that he always wanted to leave the family, that he would always, whenever he could, he would leave and he would go do other things, that he didn't like the same things his family liked, on and on and on. Okay, this is a general theme here with it. He said that at this place, Angela had began doing the dog breeding, and she wanted George to help. So she had both of the boys help her with the dogs, and she had a certain way that she wanted the dogs fed, and he didn't do things the way she liked, and she would get mad at him. But she had somewhere between 80 and 100 dogs at one time, and more than one building for these dogs. And some of them were full bred. However, some of them were dogs that she would go down to the pound. She would have, one of her dogs would have a litter, and she would sell a few of them, and she'd keep some of them back. And then she'd go down to the pound, and she'd pull in some dogs that looked like that litter, and she would sell them as if they were actual full bred. And he said at times she would even take hair dye and she would dye the spots so that these dogs that she picked up at the pound looked like the other dogs in the litter. And she was raising all kinds of different breeds. In 2007 was when the family went on a vacation to Alaska. And that's when they burnt that morphed or Kentucky mansion. And that was because they wanted the money to move to Alaska. And then they didn't because Billy was upset at the time that he didn't want to leave his dad. So Billy's dad was, for the last few years of his life, was disabled and needed help getting in and out of bed. And so Billy, there in the last year before they were arrested, he lived there pretty much full time. I know, right? Poor George. Poor thing. So then they built a new house, which was the one that they had before they moved to Alaska. And that one, there's a lot of houses, there's a lot of trailers, there's a lot of burning, there's a lot of this going on. But the new one that they built had a basement, and Billy and Chris Sr., yes, Roden, who they killed, Billy and Chris Sr. built a 40 by something room for Billy to grow marijuana in. And the idea about going to Alaska was because they had they had friends, the pastor and his son, I cannot pronounce their name. They testified in this trial, and they live in Alaska, and theirs was the church that and people that they went and moved up to be around when they moved up there. And anyway, they had gone to visit that pastor and son because those people had lived in Ohio before. And when they went up to Alaska, that's who they went to see, and that's where they spent their little vacation. And that's why they originally why they had wanted to go to Alaska. Now, they even had a fire where those buildings that they had at that house where Angela had all of these dogs in, they came home one evening from a trip and all of those buildings had burned with the dogs. How sad. George talked about having a dog, and this dog's name was Rover, and it was like a beagle kind of thing. And he talked all about how his dog had gotten sick, how he had nursed him back from there was coyotes out on the Wagner Ranch and all that stuff, the Flying W, and he went into all this whole thing. Well, this was a whole thing to let y'all know that he's, because if he likes dogs and stuff, and he had his own dog, he would be sympathetic, right? He's not the kind of person who would hurt people. See, that's my interjection right there. That's my take. Now, Billy did have a field full of marijuana. However, it was out on the Flying W ranch, and Frederica had hired a tree trimmer, so Billy had to chop that down early, and he lost money on that. I gotta get a drink. Billy claimed that he had money buried in everywhere from Texas to Ohio, all the way to Texas. Have you guys heard of people burying what's called a cache? These are a lot of people who are, say, doomsday preppers or other groups talk about burying caches where you would have money, you would have guns, you would have food, and that way if something happened, you'd be able to go from place to place, and you'd have what you needed to take care of yourself. I think this was kind of the basis of what he was talking about. He said that he had buried money, and he would come home with bags of money that he had gotten. Who knows where it came from, right? Oh, it's just so convoluted and crazy, and I just cannot see how he could not be guilty, Kimberly. I just can't see it. Hello, Shad. Nice to see you. Glad you're here. How are you doing? Haven't seen you in a very long time. I hope you're well. Did you get moved into your tiny house? No necklace tonight. What am I thinking? Got my earrings, but no necklace. Shad likes necklaces. So the lawyer asked him about Crystal Springs. Now, this is the venture on the Flying W Ranch where Frederica was one of Frederica's nonprofits, and George said it was an MMRD. So basically it was a place where those who were children in their own minds would live. And this was introduced because George's wife Tabby wound up working there because Tabby's mother had worked there with Frederica also. So, oh, you are? How wonderful. I'm so happy for you, Shad. You're finally in your tiny house. Been working towards that for a long time. So glad. So get this, because George quit school when he was 13, he had to get his education finished somehow, right? Well, Angela didn't want him to take his GED just like the others. So she went ahead and finished the school for him and took the test. And that's how he got his GED. He talked about having fights with Billy. The worst one happened at the Flying W, where Billy somehow was trying to lasso George with a lariat, and it got around George's neck and it sort of tightened on his neck, but George pulled it hard enough that he put Billy on the ground and beat the holy you know what out of him. And then they didn't talk to each other for a while, and that's what they used to do, that they would fight, and that is what would happen. Hello, Rosie. So George says that his Aunt Robin, now this would be Robin Wagner, and this would be Billy's sister, that George's Aunt Robin set George up with Tabby. He was 12. She was 11. Who does this? I mean, excuse me, 12 and 11, who sets anybody up? Hell, they don't even know who they are. Yeah, these people obviously didn't know who they were. They only knew they were Wagners, right? So Tabby had a sister named Trish, and originally Robin said that she was going to set George up with Trish, and she was setting Jake up with Tabby, and you know that these were sweet girls, and she just really wanted them to meet them, and da 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 da. And Robin lives at the Flying W with Frederica, and worked around there, worked at Crystal Springs. I gotta take the hat off, y'all. Gotta take the hat off. Too hot. The heater just came on. And it wound up that Tabby wound up liking George, and Trish wound up with Jake. Tabby's mom, like I said, worked at Crystal Springs, and so Tabby and her sister Trish started staying with the Wagners also. Tabby started to, she originally had George's room. Trish did not wound up not liking Jake and decided to leave and go live with her mother. But Tabby and George by this time were boyfriend, girlfriend. And when Jake took his room back, then Tabby was either going to sleep on the couch or she was going to have to sleep in George's room, and George was going to sleep on the couch. And everybody decided, well, it just wasn't right for them to sleep on the couch. So they slept together in George's room. By then he was about 13. Again, who does this crap? Who does that? It's just wrong. So they had an on again, off again relationship. This is important coming forward. This relationship with Tabby and the marriage with Tabby and all of that falls into the prosecution's case of why the Wagners did what they did, why they killed the Rodens, okay? And George and Tabby had an on again, off again. They were together all this time when they were younger, and then she left, and they started to talk again later on. When Hannah and Jake started to get together, and Hannah and Tabby had talked a little bit, and then Tabby started to text George, and so then they started to get together again. And George says he knew Hannah 3 to 4 months before Jake knew her because he met her out at the Big Bear Lake. And he said he considered Hannah a little sister. Now, when Tabby moved back in and they were a little bit older, Tabby and George were together, and Hannah and Jake were together, and they were all living at the Wagner's house, all of them together. And George said that he and Hannah had the kind of relationship where they could talk to each other about anything. He said that they would talk about personal stuff, and Jake did not like that George was so close to Hannah, even though George said that there was nothing between the two of them. He said there was nothing between them, but Jake would get mad because, because they were so close. It upset him. And now George says that him and Tabby had gotten back together when she was 18 and he was 19. And he said that because Tabby had a rough life, he felt bad for her, and he thought that he could help her and get her past some of the stuff that she'd had that was so bad. And he said she had emotional problems. Said she was supposed to be on meds, but he didn't know what those meds were supposed to be. Said she wasn't on the meds when they were together, so he didn't know what she was supposed to be taking. But that she would, she would have fits, or she would get mad, she would get depressed, and all this kind of stuff. She tried to kill herself and all these things. And she got pregnant a year into their marriage. And while she was pregnant, she came down with an STD. And he said that she told him that this is something that could lay dormant and then it could come back, and that's why she had it, and blah, blah, blah. So she got rid of it, taking medication, and got rid of it. And then a few months, a month or so before she had the baby, she got it again. And then he was like, okay, so then he knew for sure that that wasn't what was going on. And she admitted to him that she was sleeping with her best friend's father. So Tabby was a mess. Okay. I give it to her that she was a mess. Because what had happened to Tabby and her sister, well, I'll get into that in a minute. And George was worried that their son, he calls him Vine or Vi. His name is Bullvine. And he was worried that Vine was not safe around Tabby because he would just happen to get kind of hurt when he was around her, when he was alone with her. Like he would come out of the bathtub and have where he got banged on the head, or one time that she admitted that she had taken his hand and stuck it in some hot vegetables, and she admitted to that because she had just gotten so frustrated. And another time he said that he thought that she had pushed him off of the bench, and she said she was reaching to grab him to bring him back up on the bench, but he said it looked a lot like she was pushing him off this bench. I know. Yes, lots of dysfunction going on. This is a theme, you guys. When we talk about these crimes and the things that happen and why people do what they do, the dysfunction really runs through a lot of this. Okay, there's a pattern here of dysfunction with a lot of these cases. And Tabby's mother admitted that Tabby was not really able to handle the son, that she was not really all that great with him. That was in her, what she had said. Now, George says he had come home one time and Tabby was in the bathroom, that Vine was sitting up, like in a carrier or whatever. He was up on the counter and she was locked in the bathroom and he had to barge into the bathroom and go in to get her out, and that she was sitting in a pool of her own blood, that she had a pair of scissors and she was trying to kill herself. And at that time he took her to the hospital. She went in the hospital for a little while and she got kind of straightened out a little bit. When she got out, he told her he wanted her and him and Vine to move to Alaska. Again, here's this whole thing. I need to get away from my family, because Tabby had said the whole reason that she did this was because she couldn't handle being around George's mother, Angela, anymore. However, every time George decided they were going to pack bags and they were going to leave, Tabby would talk him out of it and say, we don't have the money for that. What are we going to do? We can't afford to go do that. Now, George claims that he and Jake and his mother had nothing in common. He says that Jake and Angela thought they were better than everyone else, that their crap didn't stink, and, so on and so forth. And he says that when Tabby left, now this is interesting. He says when Tabby left, that she had been changing Vine's diaper, that she was getting too rough with him. He tried to take over and say, look, let me do it. He's crying. Let me do it. And she grabbed him and was swinging him and hit his head against the door frame. And that George took him from her and gave him to Hannah, because at the time Hannah was living there also. And that Tabby just walked out of the house. And that Angela was not in the house at that time. And that Angela came home and that she tried to get in the middle of it. And by now they were outside, and that George yelled at her and they started to fight, and he went back inside and Angela went back inside. No, he tried to calm her down. She wouldn't come back in the house, all that kind of stuff. So he left, went back in the house. Angela had gone back in the house and Tabby walked off. That's his story. He also says that when he was trying to calm her down, that she hit him and bit him and ran off. Now, here's me again injecting what I think. Very interesting that he talks about how she hit him and bit him. My estimation in that right there, what does that say to you guys? Does that strike anything with you at all, that she felt like she needed to hit him and bite him? Or the fact that he took the child from her? Because her story when she was on the stand is nothing like his story. Nothing. Hello, Debbie. She claims that Angela knew that they were going into the bedroom, that they were supposed to go be together in the bedroom, that Angela was upset because Angela had been gone, and that she had told Tabby to do a whole bunch of stuff and that Tabby hadn't done it, and that when she got back, she and Angela got into it. And when Tabby tried to leave is when George grabbed a hold of her and tried to keep her from taking her son and leaving. And that's how the child, the tossing around is how the child got And that at that point is when she did hit him and bite him to try to get away from him and to try to take the child. So then she says she went outside and that they were all looking for her. She was hiding under vehicles out in the yard. They all had flashlights and they were trying to come and find her. She made her way down. She walked down the road down to the truck stop, and that she tried to make a phone call there inside of the truck stop, and she had called the police, but George and them, they had already called the police and already turned her in and said that she had tried to hurt the child. So there's a lot of discrepancies between his story and her story. Okay. So that's one of the things. Chelsea, you were wondering what I found out. Well, that's one of the things right there. So then George says that later that he found a letter from, and this is another discrepancy. He said that he found a letter from Tabby in his mailbox. And he said that in the letter, she said something to the effect that, and there was a lot of objections to this because they were trying to say what Tabby said, and that's hearsay, and they can't do that. So there's a lot of that going on. And basically that she wanted to go live with her mother and that she wanted Vine to stay there and live with George. That's what he said. Now, Tabby testified that she had already had papers drawn up to serve to him, to let him know that she was going to take the child and leave. Well, we don't know. Nobody has, as far as I know, the evidence of a letter was not there, and the evidence of this paperwork was not there. Okay, so I don't know, but again, they don't match. Hey, Deneen. Now, George says that Tabby and her sisters, that here's the thing that he was upset. He didn't want Tabby to be, he was upset about Tabby being alone with the child, wanted her to be there with the mother and all of those things, because when Tabby and her sisters were young, that her mother's boyfriend had sexually abused them and that she had held them down for him to do it. And she admitted to that. And his lawyer asked him, said, okay, so you knew Tabby had all these problems, right? Why in the world would you marry her? Why'd you marry her? Why did you go through with it? He said, well, we've known each other since we were little, and I thought I could help her. None of this adds up to me. Okay. This is just him and his lawyer. None of this adds up. Not at all. Now, George claims that Tabby got to see Vine for Thanksgiving and Christmas and several visits at his house, where sometimes she brought her sisters or her boyfriend, and he didn't like them being there, yada, yada. Oh, thank you, Karen. Thank you very much. I've been trying to get at night, get it all down, but it's hard. Now, I will tell you that Tabby said, this is not what she said happened. She said that every time she tried to go see him, tried to go see Vine, she was always told, well, you can't right now because George isn't home. George doesn't want you to come in the house when he's not here, and he'll be home later, so she wouldn't get to see him. And she said she did get to see him for Thanksgiving for like a half a day, and she got to come over at Christmas and be with him outside for just a little while, and that was it. And then after that, nothing. She just did not get to see him. So that's another place where their things don't add up. I'm so glad you guys find this interesting because, like I said, I haven't really gotten into the part where the prosecution is I just haven't got that far yet. Now, George says that he did try to get back together with, now this is another thing that is important, that he said he tried to get back together with Tabby, but it didn't work out. So they got a divorce. And he says that he picked her up for all the court-related things. When they went to court, they had to go to a marriage, the court-appointed counseling thing. I had to do this with my divorce too. They have to tell you how to treat the kids and how to work things out so that, so and so gets their time and you get your time, and it's the easiest transition for the children. And he said that, they sat next to each other, and that the person who was doing this this deal, that he was very surprised that they sat next to each other during it. It doesn't usually happen. It didn't happen for me. So that's another discrepancy again between what he says happened, that he was Mr. Mr. Nice Guy, that he went and picked her up for all of this stuff and always made sure that she had the opportunity. He says that he told her when they moved to Alaska, that he told her that he would pay for an airplane flight for her to come and stay in Alaska so that she could visit with the boy, that he would pay for her visits. And she said there wasn't any way in hell she was going to Alaska because she'd never get to come home, that they would have kept her there and that she wouldn't have been able to leave. So, oh, thank you. This is a big case, so it's really hard to have, to get everything, down. But, and I don't have it all. There's no way I could have it all, but I got a lot of it. Now, George said that he and Jake built, this is another one. Y'all ready for this? George says that he and Jake built the goose box. Now, do y'all know about the goose box? The goose box is what was found out in the lake, out at the Flying W, and tied to all four corners of the goose box was the 5-gallon buckets, which were full of cement. And in the cement was found all the guns that were used to kill the rodents. George says he and Jake built that together, and Jake said that George built it. It was for their granddad's birthday because he loved Canadian geese. So they built this goose box for him to put on this lake in this spot that was like their granddad's favorite spot, and that the geese could go into this box. It would float and they could go in and out, and that he would be able to watch for the geese, right? And he said that they did that because his granddad's birthday was in February of 2016. Now, these murders happened in April of 16. He said he and Jake and Angela and the kids took the box out to the lake on the Flying W, that they placed the box in the lake, and that they anchored it with some metal bars, that they anchored it in the center of this lake. And he went through this whole spiel of how they slid it off of his truck into the side over there, and then he had to kind of drive around, and he had to attach a rope, and he had to pull it so that it would be kind of in the middle of the lake, and all of this stuff, and that it had like a foam board underneath it that would keep it floating, and then they just anchored it there. That's what he says they did. So where'd the buckets come from? How'd that all happen? Because when it was found, that's how it was found, with those buckets. Doesn't add up. So the lawyer and George talked a lot about the guns in the house, and this went on and on. I'm not going to go into all of this because there was a lot of it. They went back and forth about, well, this gun and then that gun, and I think that the whole reasoning behind that, again, this is my interpretation, is that the lawyer really wanted everyone to see that George was, he had guns, that his family had guns, that everybody had guns. So, they had a safe and they had guns in the safe, and then they each had some like in their vehicle, and then he talked about how his mom had one in the cabinet in the kitchen, and they just, it was just a thing. They had guns, no big deal, right? They also talked about his tattoos. So does anybody know about the tattoos? Anybody been watching? You guys, any of you that have been watching this case, other than what I have been covering, could you put a 1 in the chat for me, please, and let me know? And have you seen any of this testimony? Because there's a whole deal where after the murders were committed, George, Jake, and Billy all went down and got tattoos. Matching tattoos. These were tattoos of an 8-ball. An 8-ball, a deck of cards, and I don't even know what all was on there. And there was some significance to this, to the prosecution, because the 8 matched how many people were killed. Okay. And also because the 8-ball stood for a dead man's hand. That's because it was deck of cards and all this, that as a like card hand or whatever, that was the dead man's hand, the 8. Anyway, so George said the reason he got a tattoo, that his dad paid for it, and that he wanted to cover up his Cummins C tattoo because he's a huge Cummins truck fan, right? And he had this Cummins on there, and that everybody used to make fun of it because whoever did this tattoo for him did not do the smoke right, and then it looked more like bubbles, and so he got called Bubbles because of his tattoo. So he wanted to get it covered up, and the guy who did the tattoo said that he needed something of a pretty significant size to cover it up. And that guy did testify during the trial, and he testified to this and said that he did bring this up, that it was his idea, not George's. So that was interesting. And during his testimony, George said it was not his idea, that it was the tattoo artist. Now, he was a witness for the defense, by the way, not for the prosecution, the tattoo guy. And they went into a little bit more about how George knew all of the Rodens and how he had met the different Rodens and how their families knew each other and all those kinds of things. And I did not take notes on all of that, actually. I kind of skipped through some of that. Yes. Yep. It does get a little confusing. So, well, we're at an hour, you guys, and I've still got quite a bit to go, but I don't think we're going to get through it all. So I may go ahead and say that while being examined by his lawyer, by his defense lawyer, he says that he did not know anything about the plans to kill the Rodens, that he didn't take part in the killings or the planning, that he could not believe that his family was capable of pulling off something of this magnitude. His words. Says that if he had known, he would never have let it happen. If he had found out about it while he was out tearing down a building, His mother called and told him he needed to come home. So I do need to go ahead, and I'm going to stop now and give y'all an update. Okay. Serbs is over there on my bed, my air bed. That's where he is. Okay, Crafty Annie, talk to you later. Thank you for being here. I'm gonna you're welcome, Kimberly. So Dad is doing great. He's upstairs. You might be able to hear the TV. I don't know. He's doing great. His surgery went great. He got home yesterday. He's eating normally, but he has to eat soft foods and bland foods for a while. So he's healing, but he's doing great. Everything went so well. It could have been bad, and it wasn't. And I'm very thankful. So all of you that with all of your great thoughts and prayers for Dad, thank you so very, very much. I appreciate that. I really, really do. And he's doing good. But I'm probably going to be here. I know he has a follow-up appointment on the 29th, and I will probably be here until after that. So just to give you guys an idea. Yes. Okay, you guys, I need to go to the little girl's room, and I need to let Serbs out, and we have 3 inches of snow outside, so I have to get all bundled up to go do it. Oh, I did want to show you one thing. Maybe I'll just come back and show you some stuff on Sunday. How does that sound? We'll try to do a Sunday show this week, and I'll try to show you some things. How does that sound? Okay, you guys, I got to go. So I love y'all. Have fun today. I will be back with a lot more notes, everything that I can find out from this point, and the prosecution when she's, oh, I bet you that was really good. So I'm just getting into it. Love y'all. You guys take care, and I will talk to you later. Okay? Eat more plants. Bye, everybody. Oh, I love you, Chelsea. I love you, Solomon. I love you, Oliver. I love you, Carrie. I love you, Sailor. And I love you, Mr. Fiber. And I'll see y'all later.